The entire restaurant went silent when my 7-year-old son asked one heartbreaking question. Every grandchild at the table had a sizzling $120 steak in front of them, except him. My sister smiled, pushed a basket of free bread across the table, and said, "That's enough for him." My father didn't defend us. Instead, he looked at me and said, "If you can't afford expensive dinners, don't expect everyone else to pay." My son lowered his head and whispered, "Mom, am I not really part of this family?" I smiled, held his hand, and quietly replied, "No, sweetheart, they're about to learn exactly what family is worth." For most of my life, I believed family was supposed to be the one place where your children never had to earn love. I was wrong. Looking back now, I realize the signs had always been there. My older sister, Melissa, was the golden child. She married a successful real estate developer, lived in a gated neighborhood, drove a brand new luxury SUV every other year, and somehow every family gathering turned into another celebration of her life. I wasn't jealous. At least, I tried not to be. After my divorce 6 years earlier, I worked as an event planner, built my business from scratch, and raised my 7-year-old son, Ethan, mostly on my own. We weren't rich, but our bills were paid, our home was warm, and my son never went to bed wondering whether he was loved. To me, that mattered more than appearances. Still, every holiday, birthday, and anniversary, I kept showing up. I kept hoping my family would eventually see me as more than the struggling sister. Then Grandpa announced he wanted everyone together for his 75th birthday dinner. Melissa immediately volunteered to organize everything. She chose the city's most expensive steakhouse. "No one worry about the kids," she texted in the family group chat. "I've already taken care of them." I assumed she meant she'd reserved a large table. Nothing more. The restaurant was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. A pianist played softly in the corner while waiters carried sizzling platters through the dining room. Even Ethan's eyes grew wide. "Mom," he whispered, "this place looks like a movie." I smiled. "It kind of does." He straightened the little navy blue button-up shirt we'd picked out together. "I hope Grandpa likes my birthday card." "You made it yourself," I said. "He's going to love it." Grandpa hugged Ethan the moment we arrived. "There's my favorite artist." Ethan grinned. "I drew your fishing boat. I can't wait to see it." For a moment, everything felt normal. Then dinner began. The waiter approached carrying a tray unlike anything I'd ever seen. One after another, enormous ribeye steaks were placed in front of each grandchild. Steam curled into the air. Butter melted across perfectly grilled meat. The children gasped excitedly. "This one's mine?" "Wow. It smells amazing." Even the adults admired the presentation. The waiter smiled proudly. "Our chef hopes everyone enjoys the pre-ordered premium Wagyu selection." I looked toward Ethan. He smiled patiently, waiting his turn. The waiter finished serving every child. Then he walked away. Ethan looked around the table. "So," he whispered, "mine's coming next?" Before I could answer, Melissa casually reached into the center of the table, grabbed a complimentary bread basket, and placed it in front of him. We didn't order one for Ethan. She smiled as if she'd simply forgotten to request extra napkins. "You can have bread." The entire table became strangely quiet. I honestly thought she was joking. I even laughed once. "Oh," I said, "I think there's been some mistake." Melissa shook her head. "No mistake." She picked up her wine glass. "We only pre-ordered steaks for the grandkids who confirmed weeks ago." I frowned. "We confirmed." She shrugged. "You said you'd probably come." I changed it to yes 3 days later. Too late. My father leaned back in his chair without looking at me. "You should have packed Ethan something if you weren't sure." For a second, I couldn't even process what he'd just said. "You knew every other child would be eating steak?" He nodded. "Well, that's what was ordered." Around the table, no one spoke. Some stared at their plates. Others suddenly became fascinated with their phones. Nobody said, "Just order another one." Nobody offered to share. Nobody even questioned how a 7-year-old was supposed to sit there watching every other child enjoy a special birthday dinner while he ate free bread. Then Ethan tugged gently on my sleeve. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. Mom. I looked down. His smile was gone. Did I do something bad? That question hurt more than anything anyone else had said. I reached across the table and held his little hand. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. His eyes searched mine. Then, why don't I get one? I forced myself to smile. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. He nodded slowly.
He didn't cry. He didn't complain.
He simply broke off a small piece of bread and quietly began eating it while pretending not to notice the sizzling steaks surrounding him. That was the moment my heart broke. Not because of the food. Because my little boy believed he was the problem. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to raise my voice. People who treat a child that way rarely change because someone lectures them. Instead, I calmly called the waiter over. We'll just have 2 lemonades, I said. When the bill arrived, I paid for our drinks, thanked Grandpa for inviting us, and stood up. Melissa looked surprised. You're leaving already? I smiled politely. Ethan and I have an early morning tomorrow. My father barely looked up. Drive safely. I placed my hand on Ethan's shoulder as we walked toward the exit. Halfway to the door, I turned back one last time. Every adult at that table was laughing again. As if nothing had happened. As if one little boy's broken heart didn't matter. I looked at them for a few quiet seconds before smiling to myself. People always reveal exactly who they are when they believe you'll never become someone they need. I squeezed Ethan's hand. Come on, buddy. He looked up at me. Are we okay? I smiled. We will be. Exactly 2 weeks later, every person at that table would suddenly remember we were family. For the next 2 weeks, I never mentioned the steakhouse. Not to my parents. Not to Melissa. Not even to Ethan. Children heal much faster than adults when they're surrounded by love, and I refused to let one ugly dinner become a permanent memory for my son. Instead, we spent the following Saturday at the zoo. The weekend after that, we made homemade pizzas together. By Monday, Ethan was laughing again. Meanwhile, my phone started ringing. The first call came from my mother. It was strange because she rarely called unless she needed something. Hi, sweetheart, she said cheerfully. How are you and Ethan? I almost smiled. She hadn't asked that question in months. We're doing well. Good, good. There was a short pause. I heard your company landed a pretty big contract. So, that's why she called. Word traveled fast in our town. My event planning company had just been awarded the contract to organize the annual Hope Horizon Charity Gala, one of the largest fundraising events in the county. Every year, business owners, hospital directors, nonprofit leaders, city officials, and major donors attended. The local newspaper even covered it. Winning the contract had taken me nearly 8 years of hard work. Hundreds of late nights. Thousands of tiny details. Missed vacations. Financial risks. It wasn't luck. It was earned. Yes, I answered. We're excited. I knew you'd do great, Mom said quickly. I always believed in you. That sentence almost made me laugh. For years I'd heard, Melissa's husband is the successful one. You should think bigger. Maybe one day you'll catch up. Now suddenly, she'd always believed in me. After a few more minutes of small talk, she finally reached the real reason for the call. So, how many guests are you allowed to invite? There it was. I explained politely. The gala has very limited seating. Most invitations are reserved for sponsors, donors, volunteers, and business partners.
Oh.
She sounded disappointed. I figured family would automatically be included. I'm actually not making those decisions personally, I replied honestly. We have an admissions committee. I understand, but I could tell. She didn't. The next afternoon, Melissa called. Unlike Mom, she didn't waste time pretending. I need 4 VIP invitations. I nearly laughed. Hello to you too. Oh, come on, she said. Don't be dramatic. My husband has clients he'd like to meet. I'm sure you can squeeze us in. I can't. Seriously? There are rules. She sighed loudly. You're running the event. Just make an exception. I looked out my office window before answering. For years I'd bent over backward, trying to keep peace inside this family. Now everyone suddenly expected special treatment. I'm sorry. The guest list is based on sponsorships and official invitations. I don't control it. You could if you wanted.
Maybe.
But I wasn't going to. She ended the call, sounding irritated. 2 days later, Dad stopped by my office unexpectedly. He looked around the lobby with obvious surprise. The walls displayed photographs from weddings, charity dinners, and corporate conferences my company had organized over the years. Employees hurried between meetings carrying laptops and floral designs. Dad slowly nodded. I didn't realize your business had gotten this big. I smiled politely. We've been growing for a while. He cleared his throat. Melissa says the gala is sold out. It is. He shoved his hands into his pockets. I figured maybe you could help family. I remembered another dinner, another request for help. Another little boy sitting in front of free bread while everyone else enjoyed expensive steaks. Funny how quickly people remembered family when they wanted something. I'm sorry, Dad. The attendance policy applies to everyone. He frowned. You'd really tell your own father no? I'm not telling you no. I'm following the same standards I promised every guest. He didn't answer. Instead, he gave a disappointed shake of his head before leaving. That evening, my assistant walked into my office holding a stack of RSVP requests. You've got another one. From who? She smiled awkwardly. I think your sister. I opened the email. Melissa Parker requests 4 VIP admissions due to immediate family relationship with event organizer. I quietly deleted the request. No anger. No satisfaction. Just professionalism. Rules existed for a reason. Over the next several days, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly became incredibly friendly. An uncle invited Ethan fishing. A cousin wanted to catch up. Even my aunt called to say she'd always admired how hard I worked. The timing wasn't subtle. Everyone wanted access. Nobody wanted accountability. One evening, Ethan looked up from his homework. Mom, yeah, buddy. Why does Grandma keep calling now? Children notice everything. I smiled. Sometimes people remember your value a little later than they should. He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Like when someone doesn't pick you for their team, until they realize you're actually good. I laughed softly. Something like that. The night before the gala, my event team held one final meeting. Every seat had been assigned. Every security badge printed. Every guest verified. No exceptions. As I looked over the final attendance list, I noticed something that made me pause. Not a single member of my family had received an invitation. Not because I'd removed them, because none of them had actually qualified. I closed the folder, smiled to myself, and turned off the lights in my office. Tomorrow morning, the same people who thought my son wasn't worth a steak were about to discover that respect couldn't be reserved at the last minute. The morning of the Hope Horizon charity gala started before sunrise. By 6 o'clock, my entire team was already inside the convention center. Florists were arranging centerpieces. Technicians were testing microphones. Volunteers checked registration lists one final time. Every table had been assigned weeks earlier. Every guest had a printed badge. Every detail mattered. I walked through the ballroom with my clipboard while Ethan proudly followed beside me wearing a tiny navy blazer and polished shoes. He looked around with wide eyes. Mom, this is all because of you? I smiled. Because of all of us. He grinned. I'm going to help today. I know you are. My staff adore him. One volunteer handed him a small badge that read, Junior Host. His smile stretched from ear to ear. I get my own badge.
You earned it, she said.
Around 10:30, the first guests began arriving. Business owners, doctors, teachers, community leaders. Many stopped to shake my hand. Congratulations. Beautiful event. We've heard wonderful things about your company. Others knelt to Ethan's level. You must be Mom's assistant. He laughed proudly. I'm the junior host. Everyone smiled. Exactly 30 minutes later, I heard raised voices near the entrance. I looked toward the registration desk. Melissa, my parents, her husband, and several relatives. They weren't smiling. A security supervisor stood calmly behind the welcome counter. I'm sorry, he repeated politely. I don't see your names on today's guest list. Melissa crossed her arms. There must be some mistake. My sister organized this event. The supervisor nodded professionally. I understand. Unfortunately, only registered guests may enter. She pointed across the lobby. There she is. Go ask her. Every nearby conversation suddenly became quieter. People watched as Melissa marched toward me. Finally,
She stopped only a few feet away.
there you are. She forced a smile. Can you tell them we're with you? I returned the same calm smile I'd worn the night we left the steakhouse. They're following the guest list. She lowered her voice. My husband has important clients inside. I know. So, tell security we're coming. I can't. Her expression changed instantly. What do you mean you can't? The attendance policy applies equally to everyone. She stared at me. For family too? Especially for family. Behind her, my father stepped forward. This is embarrassing. I nodded. It is. He frowned. You'd really leave us standing out here? For a brief second, I remembered another restaurant, another table, another child, another public embarrassment. I looked at Dad and answered quietly. I didn't create today's rules. I simply respected them. Melissa's patience disappeared. You're actually getting revenge over one stupid dinner? Several nearby guests turned toward us. I kept my voice calm. This isn't revenge. This is professionalism. You wanted special treatment. I'm giving you exactly what every other person receives. Equal treatment. Nothing more. Nothing less. Silence filled the lobby. Then, a small hand slipped into mine. Ethan looked up at me. Mom, can I show Grandpa the ballroom after the event? Before I could answer, Grandpa slowly walked over from behind the family. I hadn't even noticed he'd arrived earlier through the sponsor's entrance. He looked at Ethan, then at me. Finally, he looked at everyone else. I owe both of you an apology. The lobby became completely silent. Grandpa sighed heavily. I should have spoken up at my birthday dinner. I watched a little boy get treated unfairly. And I said nothing. He turned toward Ethan. I'm sorry, buddy. You deserved better from all of us. Ethan smiled the way only children can. It's okay, Grandpa. No, Grandpa replied gently. It wasn't okay. Then he looked at my father. You taught your grandson that money decides who belongs. I taught him nothing. You did, Grandpa answered. By staying silent. Dad lowered his eyes. For the first time in years, he had no excuse. No explanation. No clever response. Just regret. Melissa looked around and realized nobody was defending her anymore. Not even her own husband. She quietly stepped back. I guess we should go. I nodded politely. I hope you all have a safe drive home. No sarcasm. No celebration. Just closure. Security escorted them away respectfully. The lobby returned to normal. Inside the ballroom, the charity gala was a tremendous success. We raised more money than any previous year. Guests congratulated my team. Several organizations booked future events before the evening even ended. As the last visitors were leaving, Ethan climbed onto the stage beside me. He wrapped both arms around my waist. Mom, yeah, today felt really special. It was. He thought for a second before asking, do you know what I like the most? What? He smiled. Nobody forgot about me. I felt tears trying to reach my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of heartbreak. They were tears of pride. Because the truth was never about a $120 steak. It was about something far more valuable. Children may forget what was served at the table, but they never forget who made them feel welcome. And they never forget who stood beside them when someone tried to make them feel small. That day, my son learned something I hope stays with him for the rest of his life. Respect isn't something people can pre-order. It isn't bought with money. It isn't guaranteed by family. It's earned, one choice at a time.